Today is World AIDS Day 2021. So I wanted us to remember not only those who are no longer here, but what it was like when they were leaving us. My friend Brian, he was 19. "Get up," he said. "You're going to be late for class." I was. I was always late for class. It was his birthday. He was 19. And that was going to be his last birthday. 1.2 million people in the United States of America are currently living with AIDS or HIV. I'm one of them. Back in the 80s, there was companies of artists and dancers and performers, and they're almost all gone. Almost all of them. But it wasn't just that. It was the time in which we lived in when they were dying. The time in which we lived needs to be remembered as much as the people who are no longer here. That's what we have to remember. We have to remember the 80s, when young people were dying left and right, who were covered with horrific spots, who were wasting away before our very eyes, and how we went to funerals. We have to remember those times. Because I found it best that the faith communities at that time were blinded by their interpretation of their scripture. They just could not conceive that AIDS was not some sort of divine plague upon the wicked. I thought many of the more vocal people were just playing on the tragedy to gain more publicity for themselves and their churches, and maybe they were. Because that was a really brilliant galvanizing call for the faith communities at that time. It's really easy to rally against a common enemy, but the common enemy wasn't AIDS. It was us, the dying. We were teenagers. Back when we were boys. When we were boys, and we found others who were queer and desperate like us, and scared like us. When we were boys, how we learned to hold hands and kiss. And then when we were teens, before we were even men, we were dying. At first just one, and then 2, and then 12. And then pretty much everyone you knew. Because back then, we didn't know how it was transmitted. There wasn't any information. We weren't living in the information age. There was no internet. There were no cell phones. At best, you could get your information from a pamphlet or a newspaper. That's all we had. Because soon it was too many to track. And at the time, we didn't know anything about it. In the end, it's not the disease itself that I remember most. It's the voices from faith communities who called us evil and wicked and contrary to God's law as we went to visit our friends in the hospital.